All right, so welcome to the explainED podcast. Usually I mess up the name when I say it, so I'm getting pretty good at it. We've got Sean and Renee here as well, and we've got our guest today, Katheryn Wright, coming to us from Champlain College. And Katheryn, can you introduce yourself a bit, tell us about yourself, but also answer this very important question. When I say AI, what does that mean to you?
Okay, so I will introduce myself first and then answer your question in part to give myself time to think about it.
Yeah, super easy question.
Well, I'm not sure if introducing myself is easier or harder, but at any rate, my background is in critical media studies and cultural geography. So I have been studying the intersections of place and space and digital media. And I'm really, really interested in how the kind of real kind of physical spaces converge with media space and how it shapes how we experience places. And so that's my background. I'm also interested in thinking about and studying a body of philosophy called posthuman critical theory. So and that actually informs how I think a lot about artificial intelligence. But posthumanism is really a body of diverse work which thinks about how or I want to say challenges the notion of human exceptionalism, that humans are at the height of, in the apex of the hierarchy, and that and instead tries to think about like how humans are in relationship with their environments, whether they be natural environments, biological environments, and also technological environments, and how human bodies are how they're not separate from the rest of the world, but again are connected to those same environments. So kind of one of the icons of posthuman theory is the notion of cyborgs and cybernetics, and how kind of humans and technologies are blended, and that's actually what it means to be human, that there isn't some distinct human category apart from that. So it's a challenge to a lot of kind of humanist assumptions about kind of defining kind of who we are and why we exist, and kind of our futures as well.
You said cyborg, so Sean's geeking out.
Cyborgs are really exciting.
Immediately lighting up now.
No, yeah, I'm a fan of Donna Haraway, and who in kind of the 1980s wrote the Cyborg Manifesto, but more recently has really been interested in thinking about like biological kinships. And so like to me, like that intersection of like environments and biology and technology and humans and culture is like super fascinating, and trying to like figure out what that looks like is what I'm really interested in. And so what I teach at Champlain is digital humanities, which kind of encapsulates that. So again, it's that intersection of like what it means to be human, asking those really important questions about our humanity within the context of digital culture and a digital environment. And then I think a lot of what I'm interested in is kind of speculating about the future. So trying to understand the past and the present so we can make the futures we want to make. And so I'm not sure if I've given myself enough time to answer your question about like what I initially think of. But when I think about artificial intelligence, I actually think about culture. Culture is something that's it's man-made, right? I'm thinking about movies and films. So in some ways that's artificial, and yet culture is the kind of mechanism through which we collectively as humans pass down our traditions, our hopes and dreams. It's where we can look and see where we were and to understand who we are now. And that to me is our intelligence. So I think about artificial intelligence as a form of cultural practice. It just looks different. It uses digital media and technology, but I don't think it's different from, well, it's very different from books, right? That's a different function, but like, I think more broadly, it's something that is kind of we make and that we do and we interact with, and that is not that those processes are not new, but they affect us in deep and profound ways. And that's I think what we're trying to figure out now when we're seeing the beginnings of especially generative AI kind of models, seeing how it impacts, frankly, cultural production and consumption, how we think about ourselves and how we think about our communities. And I think those questions are really important to ask and really difficult, and will help us shape kind of the future of what we're trying to envision for ourselves as we figure out how to live and work with non-humans in a new way.
Something you said reminded me of a guest we had a couple episodes ago, Brian Glennie. He also talked about place and space and how it interacts with media in different ways. His place and space was skateboarding.
Oh, cool.
And the culture around that. And then you mentioned the cultural component. How are you seeing, and I know this because my daughter goes to Champlain, but Champlain's kind of an interesting ecosystem around technology and culture, and it's maybe a little more amplified than other spaces in terms of awareness and use and immersion into that. How are you seeing culture and space and place interact with AI in that ecosystem?
For sure. I think I could answer it in two different ways. For one, I'll use an example of a class that I'm teaching now. I teach a first-year course. It's a general education course, and the overarching role is to kind of focus on collaboration in different ways you can connect with each other and learn how to kind of do that work well. And the specific focus in my class is we're working to make an alternate reality game. Have any of you encountered ARGs, alternate reality games, before? I was a big Nine Inch Nails fan in my youth. So like, I've been to.
Did you plan this?
Did you do the whole year zero thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I've written about year zero. I wrote about it in my dissertation. So like alternate reality games are amazing. Like,
that was so much fun. That was an amazing thing. Yeah.
And so my students are building ARGs on our campus. I have two running now, and I'm in my office, and I would show you my office. One ARG involves like taking care of plants, and the other one involves the process of like moving analog kind of figures. So people are making little figures on whiteboards. Oh, you should tell your daughter to play these games. Follow the URL codes that she sees around campus. But like they're making figures on whiteboards, and then you play the game, and it helps to digitize the figures that you're seeing on whiteboards around campus. Another game that I've had was about AI and automation. So the vending machines on campus came to life, and it seems to be this theme. So I think about it in a larger cultural practice. Like people are really trying to figure out artificial intelligence in terms of like practice, like what it means practically, and playing with it through games. And so kind of both of the games that are running now that students designed, I actually had no part in like pitching the concepts and games that I've had in the past are really like, what does it mean to kind of have non-humans think and to integrate digital technologies into my everyday practice? And I think that that's a broader question that using artificial intelligence kind of brings to life. And like, truthfully, I think ARGs are a perfect place to explore that. So like, it's super fun. And like, I would say that the themes of like caretaking and what does it mean to caretake something physically versus kind of using AI and using these systems. And like, so students were learning how to garden. So for my gardening game, by incorporating AI, like asking kind of chat GPT, like, how do I garden? How do I take care of herbs? So like incorporating digital practices into analog or like everyday practices, and they're playing and experimenting with that. And in that same class, I have a bunch of artists who are like, I hate generative AI. Like, I hate it. Like and yet they use it, right? So I think it's just like trying to figure out those boundaries. And to me, that's a critical question right now. Like, what are the boundaries? Like, when do I use this stuff? When do I not? What are the kind of, where can I bring myself into it? What am I giving to these systems as I'm using them? And what are they taking from me? And I feel like students are wrestling with that in all kinds of ways. So that's a more kind of practical level. Like on a broader level, Champlain College just entered into a partnership with Anthropic, so the makers of Claude. And this is really recent. So a couple weeks ago, we had an AI literacy day where people from Anthropic came to talk about the systems and introduce it. And now students have access to Claude. Claude Pro, and professors and faculty and staff have access to Claude Enterprise. And so this has created, again, a series of questions on campus like, wait a minute, so can I now use Claude to write my like, what does this mean to enter into a partnership at a college with a generative AI company? Like, how do we use this? And I think from my perspective, I think the intent is not to say you use AI all the time and we're like pushing this on you, but it's a more open, like, let's figure out how to use this. And I know that Anthropic is interested in seeing what we do and what we don't do with the access that we have to Claude. My students have been playing around with it. So like I have a student who is a senior computer science major who was trying to get AI systems to talk to each other. So how do you get Claude to integrate into character AI? Have you run across? Yeah. So so they created a character AI of Claude in the system and we're connecting it together. So just playing and experimenting and trying to figure out what these systems are and to push their boundaries as well. And to see where they break or break down culturally, socially. And I think people are really into exploring that.
So we're interviewing Alex, your president.
Oh, Alex, her name.
In a couple of weeks, but we can officially stop talking about my daughter because my adopted son, Sean Langevin, is going to just move right into everything that you just talked about.
You just became his favorite guest ever, Katheryn, when you mentioned that in chat.
No.
Just
How many Trails concerts have you been to? Because
only one, but I'm going to the next one. Yeah. I went to the Lights in the Sky tour.
So did it.
With the big LED curtain. I love it.
So did I. That's actually.
So Sean would like to ask you about the art component.
Keep them on the rails, Mike.
This is no longer about AI.
Right. Well, when you talked about AR, augmented reality games, rather, and that was the first thing I started thinking of. And then when you said Nine Nails, I just was like, oh.
No, yeah, lights.
Another one. Yes.
No, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, I have been struggling myself because I'm not an artist. So, but I have like a vision for things sometimes. So, I create stuff using generative AI and I feel like I'm happy because it's augmenting what I can do. And that feels good. But then I'm also torn because I know where it's coming from. And this might be why I assume some of the art students hate it. It's because it's creating, it's using other people's work. And I'm just wondering, is that kind of, does that get to what's bothering your art students? Because they have, artists, they have honed what they're doing, right? And they have put a lot behind it. And then just to have someone like me, make a political cartoon in the style of, whatever, or, is that?
I think so. I think that's a piece of it. That worrying about questions of, it's not authorship in the context of artwork, but questions of artistry and ownership and identity and kind of using other people's work and then having kind of AI mind from that, and then, like you said, create something in the style of someone else that someone took years to develop. I think that's a piece of it. I do think there's a broader concern about creativity and AI generated art being inauthentic, or looking different or feeling different, and that computers create different types of art that don't have, I'm gonna say, like, edge, right? It doesn't have like the thing that makes art compelling. And so that has been a lot of the conversations that I've had with students, and truthfully that I wrestle with myself. I think that computers can do things that humans can't do. Well, I know that, right? That I use kind of generative AI, and we're building some kind of AI functions for a project that I'm working on that is mapping the soundscapes of Vermont. And so computers can hear differently. They can listen and find different types of information and data and process that differently. And that's really interesting when you're trying to track how a place sounds. And we're using, my students are building models that can extract data so they can listen to large amounts of, like, kind of AI can listen to large amounts of data and then pull text, right? So a form of text extraction and computer analysis. So like computational analysis of sonic data. And so like creating and trying to identify like patterns that we couldn't hear or think about. And that to me is really compelling. And at the same time, there's something powerful in listening to a place, walking through it, being there. The experience of hearing someone's voice and the intonation of that is different from having a computer listen and classify it for you. And I feel like we have to understand what computers can and can't do as we enter into these kind of relationships with them, because there are things that we can't cede over. And I think ethically so. Like, I just taught a book, Todd Presner's Ethics of the Algorithm. Have you run into Ethics of the Algorithm as a text? You all should read it. It's amazing. It's about, Presner uses the example of Holocaust testimonies, and thinking about generative AI within the context of Holocaust testimonies is really tenuous. And so now there's a large database of survivors offering testimonies. And there is a project where survivors kind of gave testimony, and then their image has been generated, and they're recording in it. And you can talk to them in a gallery exhibition and ask specific questions. So the AI tool will say, people can ask like, well, how did you experience this? And they'll respond to you or not. They'll say, well, that's outside of my memory, but it creates that direct interaction. And Presner's book is about working through the ethical implications of what that means. And like, kind of looks at, like, it's not just about, like, when we think about a lot of these questions connected to artificial intelligence, it's not just about kind of how it works and what it's doing, but like why and in what context. And thinking about those bigger questions is really important and critical to understanding where we're moving towards. And I think it's, to me, the way Presner frames it is that technologists often focus on the how and the what, and that what we also need is someone to focus on the who and the why and the when and all of those context points. And it has to come together in order to do this work correctly.
So I'll ask it now. I know Sean's going to bring it up later, but can Sean come work for you? Is there any room in your department,
right,
for just him to just sit there?
I'll take a
please
smaller
come
desk
hang.
next to your desk.
No, come hang. No, and I share an office, so you would be one of three, so we're fine. No,
I wonder, in your work, does the topic of bias come up from AI? And
Absolutely.
I'm sure that that's a concern for a lot of people thinking about this, and I was just wondering what kind of how that's turned up in your work.
Yeah. Well, I think questions particularly of like algorithmic bias and how bias is built into the structure of computational systems is truthfully only the beginning of thinking about bias and inequity in computational systems. So kind of getting at that question again, returning, I'll kind of steal from Presner's work again, like you can think about like how racial bias, for example, is built into the way an algorithm is kind of processing data. But you can also think about how that data is being used and to what ends. And so bias becomes a much bigger question than just that initial process. And so to understand it and I don't think it can ever eradicate positionality or perspective in something that's human made, but in order to figure out how to use and think through it, then you need to think about that more holistic picture of kind of what you're using something for and to what ends, what is the intent and the impact of what you're doing. And that's how it's really come across in my work, is thinking both about like the scale of bias and how it's written in to different projects, and then also more broadly. So I can give another music example since that's the theme. So I have kind of actually the same student who was playing around with talking about character AI and kind of having it communicate with Claude for their project, developed a tool that created music preferences, but not based on genre, more based on kind of, he calls it sonic diversity. So like kind of testing how you can look at like listen and create a playlist that's the most diverse. It's an amazing project. So thinking about, and he used 172 different things that a computer can hear that we can't, to classify like the diversity of different sounds. And we brought this project into my class, and Cole is the author and worked with the team to develop this. And in the class, as we were talking through it, we were talking about how even the ways we were talking about music, so scale, pitch, major, minor keys, that itself has a perspective because it's filtered through a Western musical lens, and that the way that we were thinking about diversity was framed through that structure. And so there's bias built into a coding system. It doesn't make what his project irrelevant, but it makes us think about how we even understand music, which is actually a really cool question. So it opened up a lot of opportunity to think about music theory in my digital humanities class, because we were thinking about, well, what would happen if we took into account these other ways of hearing or other forms of music that think about pitch or relative tone or to think about that differently. And we started looking up the history of music, and that's where I think the humanities enters into these broader conversations for sure.
Katheryn, I noticed one of your areas of expertise was listed as feminist maker pedagogies. Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about that and how that can be integrated into AI and education?
Oh, sure. So feminist maker pedagogies are kind of really, I think, looking and trying to see how technologies, well, when you think of a technology and how it's made, there's often an intended use connected to that. So, when I think of data analytics, let's see how we can make a business run more efficiently. for example. When we think of AI, right, it's about creating efficiencies in the workplace. But what feminist maker pedagogies does in a broad sense is take practices that were perhaps intended for a very specific use and use them in a different way, break them, challenge them, remake them. I'm a big zine maker. So like, I love making zines. So like when we think about like something like a practice connected to zines, how people were used. So my students in my digital humanities class made zines about digital culture, but we passed them out physically, right? So that would be an example of like taking, something that we're not really supposed to do and matching it up and doing it a different way to invite questions about power and hierarchy and gender, of course, is a part of a broader conversation about identity. And so when I think about feminist maker pedagogies in the context of AI, I think about like how generative AI is making things, right? And how it's making certain things based on, again, like how like a system is asking us to approach it, but then how can we break it or use it in a way that it's not intended, or how can we play with AI and engage with it and question the power dynamics between the user and the person who's generating information? Is there a way we can upend that relationship or do something differently? I'm really asking questions more than giving answers, Renee, but I think that that's what feminist maker pedagogy is like through playing, it creates a series of questions. And so pedagogy is just the act of learning and teaching. So like learning and teaching ourselves by like playing around with this relationship and trying to figure out how we can use the work that we're doing in kind of like I said, a way that wasn't intended. I feel like it's a mindset. You can play, and to be able to give yourself over to play is actually in some ways very anti-efficiency. It's anti like what AI is supposed to do, which is like solve things quickly for you. Now I don't have to read a bunch of books. It'll just summarize it for me. But like when you step back and like actually challenge that and think about how you can integrate it in different ways or in different practices, push its limits, I think that's where the kind of two collide.
You are for sure Sean's favorite podcast.
But we're going to have to follow up with right. Our playlist.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Katheryn, we ask this of a lot of our guests is like, if going into this is all moving so rapidly, this is all moving at top speed. A lot of the things you talked about today were things that at least I hadn't heard about and ways of thinking, and actually energized me towards it instead of focusing on all the obstacles, which is amazing. But what is like your one kind of takeaway when somebody comes to you or you think about AI moving forward, that the mindset that you want people in going into it?
I think the mindset I would describe would be cautious optimism. I think a lot about what I fear about especially generative AI systems. And when I look at the history of digital culture and social media, there's always a promise attached to it. So there's this promise like with social media of like connectivity, and we're connecting with people all over the world, and we're opening information up and everything will be accessible. And yet when I look about actually how machine learning has shaped social media functions, it's been doing quite the opposite. So it pushes people into its smaller and smaller spaces, and it's harder and harder to connect with people who are different from you. Kind of your algorithms telling you to listen to this type of music and not that type of music based on what you did, right? And so you're getting pushed into these ever smaller communities and groups of people. And frankly, I worry the same thing with artificial intelligence. So I feel like there's like a powerful promise attached to what generative AI systems can do and how they can facilitate and help learning, make learning more accessible, make research more accessible. I use, I actually mainly use generative AI to code. I don't have a background in coding. I know just enough to like be able to know how to start asking questions. And so it's really helping me think about systems in a different way and learn about it. And at the same time, I have that worry that it pushes us deeper into those smaller and smaller pockets, and it kind of feeds that versus helping us connect together. But I'm optimistic that we know something now because of social media, because we've seen these trends, because we understand that computers and digital culture cannot be it, and that we have to figure out the relationship between humans, non-humans, systems, between physical, digital, that it's about connectivity and feedback as opposed to one dominating the other. And I feel like myself, my students, people I'm with, like they're wrestling with that. And to me, I'm optimistic as opposed to just saying internet good, people bad, right? And as opposed to those easy binaries, I think that wrestling and that question, like going back to my ARG games, like they were all about, taking care of things. Like we need to take care of each other. And like that brings me hope that we'll figure something out as we negotiate these new technologies.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's also kind of heartening that the algorithm, your student's algorithm that you were mentioning, is basically designed, like inverting the typical algorithm. So it's trying to use the algorithm to do the opposite, to have the opposite effect, where you hear things that are different.
It's feminist digital pedagogy.
Yes,
right? Like that's exactly what it is in action. Yeah.
And I love that.
Another cool concept, I know we're out of time, but like another cool concept that again was introduced to me by one of my students was they were talking about how they pruned their algorithms. So algorithmic pruning, but like went through and like noticed that they were getting recommended certain things. So like actually like changed and kind of played with that. So again, it's the idea of that you're playing with how you're engaging and talking with computers. This was a first year student. I think that knowledge, in terms of figuring out those boundaries and that negotiation, like I said, like that's where the optimism lies. So we can do this in a way that is ethical, but the speed is also really, I worry that the speed of how we're adopting is so fast that like our systems, particularly political systems, can't keep up with it. So it's figuring out that balance for sure is, I think, where we need to move, kind of when we're thinking about this stuff.
Thank you, Katheryn. Like, super awesome. We're definitely going to pester you for another episode. Maybe.
This is super fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah.
I would like to do more. Yes.
Yes, John. Yes, we know. Yes.
No, we can't do a whole episode on 9-inch nails.
Right.
Why not? It's actually that. Can I vote?
I can be like a side episode. You do a shot.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we'll do a spin-off.